The first guest is going to be Mr. Robert Burke, who is gubernatorial candidate for the governor for the state of Wisconsin. And then we'll be talking with Mr. Dennis Walton uh, from the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative, and he's going to be talking about the Fatherhood Summit that's coming up this weekend. And then our last guest in the second hour will be Mike Heath and a couple individuals from the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families. So again, we want to welcome you back to Fresh Start today. And as I always do, I would like to begin our conversation by saying the words Kasidia Injera, which simply means how are the children? That's Swahili. In the East African cultural tradition, the Maasai tribe individuals make the well-being of children a very high priority. And so when they generally meet people on the street in business or out in legislative circles, they begin their dialogue by saying Kasidia Injera, which means how are the children? And the anticipator, or the answer that we hope for is basically, what is it? It's Sapati Injera, which simply means the children are well. So when we have this dialogue on Fresh Start today, we are talking about child welfare and foster care related issues. This is intended to be an educational format as well as a recruitment format for individuals who would like to be involved with the foster care community. So we're going to talk, and I'm thinking my guest is calling in. He's going to join us by phone. His name is Mr. Robert Burke, and he is the Libertarian candidate for governor. And I know that some people are not even familiar with him and what his platform is, but we're going to be talking to him about what can he do, or what would he propose to do to change some of the quality of life outcomes, particularly for black children in Wisconsin. If we improve the quality of life of black children, who, according to the Annie E. Casey Foundation's report and the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families report that indicated that black children in Wisconsin are faring the worst than any other children in the nation. Black children right here in grand old Wisconsin they are faring the worst. And so we're going to talk about that. I would like to say that I have extended an invitation to the Democratic gubernatorial as well as the Republican gubernatorial to sit down and have a conversation with the African American community about what their plan of action would be. And we are very grateful that Robert Burke has responded almost instantaneously. He responded and said, I would love to have that conversation. So let me know, is Robert on the phone? Okay, so while they're waiting to get that done, let me make a couple community announcements. October is Breast Cancer Month, and we're bringing that to a close. And so you see a lot of people walking around wearing pink, and we just want to give a shout out to everybody who's been supportive of the whole breast cancer awareness movement. Also coming up this weekend, from Friday and Saturday, October 31st and November 1st at Destiny Youth Plaza will be the 9th annual Milwaukee Fatherhood Summit. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in detail, let you know who's going to be speaking, what some of the workshop titles are going to be. And we also want to announce that, listen, if you want more information about attending the Fatherhood Summit, you can call 414-906 2726 414-906-2726. Another community announcement is November the 13th, Black Child Development Institute will be hosting their annual Recognition of Community Service Dinner. For more information, you can visit their website at bcdimilwaukee.org. And then also, foster parents should be aware, those who are listening, that October is Fire Safety Month. Be sure to change your battery in your smoke detectors and to comply with all the rules and regulations that are listed in DCF. Another thing we want to say, we want to make sure that people will join us, like us on Facebook at Fresh Start 860. You can tweet us at Fresh Start 860 with your comments, suggestions. You can also email your suggestions to us at freshstart860@gmail.com. We're waiting for Robert to call in. We're going to take a brief break, and then we'll be back in the studio. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. All right, we're back. This is Fresh Start Today. Your host is Jermain Reed, and I have online Mr. Robert Burke, who is the gubernatorial candidate, Libertarian gubernatorial candidate for governor. And Mr. Burke, are you there?
I am, Jermain. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for calling in. We're going to jump right into this dialogue. Now, Robert, should I call you Mr. Burke or Robert? Which one would you prefer?
You can call me Bob. That'd be great.
Bob? All right, Bob. Okay, you call me Jermain. So,
Cool.
Bob, you're running for the office of governor for the state of Wisconsin. And as you know, there's a large number of African American children who are living below the poverty line in the state of Wisconsin. And I believe you're also familiar with the Annie E. Casey Foundation report that came out in the earlier part of this year. I believe it was around April. And then Mr. Ken Taylor's organization, the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families, released a report on September the 10th, I believe it was, indicating that that black children in Wisconsin are faring the worst in terms of their quality of life or life outcomes. Are you familiar with those reports?
I've read through some of them. I can't say that I'm 100% familiar to be able to speak directly at them, but I have read through them, and I've read that and additional data, including the Marquette poll.
Okay.
It all speaks deeply to internal problems, no question.
Okay. So the reason why I've invited you and also Governor Scott Walker and Mary Burke to be on the show, because we do talk about child welfare related issues. And I would like to know, the first question I'd like to ask you is, if you were elected governor of the state of Wisconsin, what would be some of your priority agenda items in terms of improving the quality of life for black children in the state of Wisconsin?
One of the problems that gets highly ignored in the media is, first and foremost, what we do to the black family, what we do to families in general. But the war on drugs has had probably the most devastating effect on the black community, primarily because it was a racist war to begin with. When this whole thing began all the way back in the mid-'30s with Henry Anslinger, this whole idea was really about suppressing blacks even further. And when you destroy the family, when you take away job opportunities, you take away fathers, this has lasting intergenerational effects, multi-generational effects. So it creates a dysfunctional family unit that never creates stability. So the first thing I would do, and by the way, I want to be very clear. I don't have all the answers. I'm still working through a lot of the questions because it is unique to me. In fact, right now, the problem I think with the candidates on the ballot is none of us really have a true understanding of the black community or the struggles or issues you guys face. But I do know this. The first thing we have to do is we have to get the boot of government off the back of the black community. And that's why I endorse not only legalizing marijuana for recreational and personal use, but I would actually issue pardons on my first day in office for small possession, non-violent possession of marijuana, and try and first and foremost give back the family their lives so you can get educational opportunities and job opportunities. The second thing I would do, and this is part of my platform, is I would get rid of the property tax. We need to help our poor families across the state, not just in the black community, do the most important thing, and that is to buy a home, pay it off, and create a stable household where at the very least your housing needs are settled. You have to do that. But so long as we have a property tax, you're always renting your home from the government. And when you have an economic downturn and you lose one of your incomes in your household, this doesn't encourage people to save and to look for new opportunities, such as, starting a small business. Because you have to immediately go back in the system to start earning money because you owe taxes, such as your property tax. That doesn't help the community or the poor create a stable household. If those were two things that I would do right off the bat that could help the community, I would say those would be my top two. There are a number of other things we have to look at, but they're much more radical.
Okay, so now when you talk about some of the things that have happened to the African American community and how this has some intergenerational impact, if you were elected governor of the state of Wisconsin, and knowing that I appreciate you're saying that none of us, those individuals who are on the ballot, can fully understand or really have a true understanding of what it is that the African American community is going through or has gone through and what our needs are. I appreciate that. But taking it a step further, I would like to know you mentioned that you don't have all the answers, but who do you see, or what aspects or entities in the black community do you feel that you will have to partner with in order to come up with some of these solutions to change
I
these
think
outcomes?
I think it's true. One of the things that libertarians believe firmly in is we believe in charity. We believe in charitable organizations. So when you look at a lot of the programs that are currently administered at the state level, I would actually prefer to move these into grant blocks and give them to the community charities to fund your food shelves, to fund your daycares, to fund your job training programs. I would rather these be done in your local communities and at the community level. And part of that would also include partnering up with, I'll be fair enough and say this, your church communities. I think there's a lot of important things that need to happen for the community socially as well. And I believe that social change is something that happens within your community and not from government. And so the organizations that might be able to help in that social movement of creating stable households, of helping to clean up some of the other social problems that are faced in the community, this has to happen locally. This isn't just about Milwaukee's black community. This is about every community across Wisconsin and across America. When you have social problems in your community, you have to fix those yourself. You have to take responsibility for your neighbors and your friends and help them. When we think government is the solution, we ignore the probability that the real problem is we don't care enough about the people around us to help take care of them and help them get back on their feet. That's a true way that you fix problems.
On the side there, you were in attendance at the community brainstorming session. I believe that you actually spoke there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I spoke briefly that we had some events coming for the state party next year. But then at the very end, I spoke and made comments on the voter ID. I'm really concerned about the disenfranchisement of voters in the black community. I don't know how we would make this happen. I don't know if it's constitutional or legal. But my idea is that I don't know what's wrong with a purple finger. It's good enough for the people in Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries around the world. My goal would be first and foremost to make sure that every single person gets that one constitutional vote. If I can make sure that you don't vote twice so that the red team doesn't have a fit and worry about voter ID, if I can make sure you can do that, that's my first goal. I want to make sure that everybody who walks in and hopefully votes in the correct district gets that one vote.
Okay.
But there was a bigger problem within that also, which is there's a larger voter fraud that goes on, and that's the felonies that are given for minor possession drug charges, and that disenfranchises individuals from having a vote. This is true voter fraud. They give you all these felony charges, and as you know from the Marquette poll, the black community is charged, especially for marijuana possession, at almost what? I've heard as high as 6 times the rate of whites in Milwaukee. This is essentially taking away votes from your communities, and I think that's the bigger voter fraud.
All right, but talking a little bit more about that whole felony conviction. Now, you said according to a Marquette study, it indicated that African American men are 6 times more likely to be convicted, receive a felony conviction for a small possession of marijuana.
Well, yes. Now I thought that when I look at the chart, I see it at 3.5 to 4. Somebody told me it was as high as 6.
Okay.
But what happens is that so again, people talk about the problems with drugs in the communities, and they go, "Well, of course there's problems." There's this gateway effect. What happens is that when you're 15 or 16, you get arrested for a small amount of weed, and then you're on the police's radar, and they know that you smoke weed. They know who you hang out with. They know that they smoke weed. And so by the time you turn 18, you're already on their radar and you get arrested. And then you get arrested again. And these things continue to add up. And eventually, when you receive that felony, as long as you have a felony on your record and you are on paper, you can't vote. They take away your vote as long as you're on paper for your felony. And given the exceptionally high rate of arrest, especially for small possession marijuana in Milwaukee, they're literally taking away the vote of black individuals in the city.
And so tying that to child improving the quality of life for African American children, how important is the vote? African Americans being able to vote, to participate in. Go ahead.
It's absolutely important, but it isn't just the vote that's important. It's what that conviction does to the job opportunities. Look, I'll be perfectly honest. I had a conviction for a small possession of marijuana and cocaine back in 1990. And I know what that did for me and what it looked like for me in my life, considering, boy, will somebody hire me with these convictions? Am I going to be able to get one of those great jobs? Am I going to be able to go to school? Can I get the student loans? I can only imagine what it would be like to be living in Milwaukee and have 2 or 3 or 4 possession charges and a felony. You can't get jobs. That destroys the life of those children. Why? Not because you smoke pot. I'll be quite honest, and I want to be honest about this. Jermain, I still smoke pot from time to time. You know what? Employers want to hire me. Why? Because I'm a good worker and I'm a smart guy. And the same thing is true of the blacks in Milwaukee. You know why they can't get a job? Not because they smoke pot. They can't get a job because they got caught.
Robert, we're going to take a break right after. Wait, hold that thought right there. Just 1 second. We're going to take a break. Bob, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. We are back in the studio. I'm your host, Jermain Reed, and we have Bob Burke on the line, Mr. Robert Burke, who is the Libertarian gubernatorial candidate that's running for the office of governor. And voting is next on the 4th, November the 4th. Next week, Tuesday.
We're already started. We're already in the role of early voting, but yeah, next Tuesday.
Right, and so people can go out and vote today up until next week, Tuesday, if they want to cast their vote early. Now, Bob, I had to take a break. I had to get me something to drink. You had mentioned that we were talking about marijuana, the use of marijuana, and how that impacts, or the relationship between the use of marijuana or the possession of marijuana and felony convictions, and particularly for African-American men when we talk about the felony conviction. And the rate at which they receive felony conviction is higher than what their counterparts or with Caucasian men receive, correct?
Absolutely. That's the data that I'm reading. And you know what astounds me the most, Jermaine? And I admit, listen, we're on a show and we're talking about campaigning, so I'll be honest about this. I first found the first information I found on this was in the study that was done back in probably 2002 or 2003, I think. This has been going on for 11 years. You guys vote, and by you guys, I mean, actually, let me rephrase that. The African-American community votes heavily Democrat. Why haven't the Democrats gone to start legalization? Or why didn't the previous governor, who was a Democrat, why didn't he start a program of pardoning individuals to give back education opportunities to our youth? This is one of the biggest and the easiest fixes to this entire problem. Maybe you can enlighten me. It seems to me that this is a systemic problem that didn't creep up in the last year. This has been going on for over a decade.
And you're right. We have had some serious problems with regards to, and I don't want to get too political because I don't have all the answers for you, Bob.
Sure.
And what I really want to do is create a platform where you can share what you would do if you were elected governor for the state of Wisconsin in terms of help improving the quality of life for black children in particular. And I really want to kind of talk a little bit more about this whole piece with marijuana, the usage and the possession. And I have someone in the studio that's actually the next guest, but he was talking about how it's not just, his name is Dennis Walton from the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative. And he was saying that, Dennis, say hello.
Hey, how y'all doing out there?
Okay.
I'm good, Dennis. Thank you.
Dennis was saying that it's not just about the use of marijuana.
Right.
What is the issue here?
Well, again, in no way do I promote marijuana, but understanding how marijuana is used as a way to disenfranchise a community of people, understanding the stigma that's associated with it and why it has the criminal element is what our community needs to understand. So when we talk about the decriminalization of marijuana, it's not about promoting people smoking marijuana. It's about understanding how this particular herb, which is not even really a drug, which is not a drug at all, is utilized to disenfranchise people. So in the black community where marijuana usage is glorified, promoted, and heavily used, you have a lot of young people who gravitate towards the culture of marijuana, and just individuals across the board, who have used marijuana through, throughout the ages. It's not something that is new. But when you look at the fact that if you get caught with, let's say, a joint of marijuana, you see the young people smoking blunts and things of that nature, or they have marijuana rolled up in a cigar leaf. If they get caught with that marijuana the first time, it's like a $600 ticket. And it's a
Oh
misdemeanor.
yeah,
It's a misdemeanor
that's huge.
charge. It's a misdemeanor charge, and their licenses is suspended for 6 months off of that conviction. If they get caught a second time, it is an automatic felony. They can get caught with as much as a marijuana seed, and that seed will cause for can contribute to a felony conviction. Now, when you look at the fact that a person smoked a marijuana joint or has used small dosages of marijuana, and then now they have a label of felon that is associated with them at the age of 18, 19, 20 years old, now you have a community of individuals who are totally disenfranchised from the voting process, from now they have the stigma of a felon, which lowers your self-esteem, which, it's so many different things that come out of that small, that conviction, which it seems to be a small thing, but it turns out to be very major when you look at how it disenfranchises our community.
And one thing I can say,
go ahead, Jermain.
one thing I can say, Bob, from a child welfare perspective, is there's a large number of children who come into the system's care, and they come from families where drug use and alcohol abuse is their reality. And so when I'm listening to this conversation, how do we, are we saying that we should not smoke marijuana, that it's okay to smoke marijuana, or why do people use marijuana? Is it for coping, to deal with just the anxiety and the stress of being black?
Well, that's a great question. Let me address two sides of this question. So the first one is, there is a problem with addiction, and obviously not just in the black community. There's a problem with addiction in Wisconsin. We are a heavily alcoholized state. There are new treatments for addiction that are currently being blocked by the FDA. And in much the same way that we legalize marijuana state by state by taking back the 10th Amendment, we could bring these treatments to Wisconsin and treat people, cure, by the way, not treat for a lifetime of sitting in an AA meeting. We could cure people of their heroin addiction, of their cocaine addiction, of their alcoholism, and we could do this for about a fraction of the cost of incarcerating. I sat in a listening session with Representative Nygren from Marinette when he told the group, essentially 100% of the people we incarcerate for heroin come back out and reoffend and go back to prison. Well, of course they do. You've destroyed their life and taken away any opportunity. But on top of that, you spend $24,000 a year to incarcerate them, and then you throw your hands up and wonder why you don't have money for inpatient treatment. This isn't that hard to figure out, guys. This is a healthcare issue, not a legal issue. So we can do something on the first side of this, which is the addiction. But the second part, and Dennis, you're absolutely right, man. I think one of the keys to bringing the black community back to prosperity actually lies in marijuana. You legalize it, you let these individuals create small grows, as long as they regulate and sell it legally through regulated shops that they open up. I think there's a huge amount of economic activity that can come to the neighborhoods and communities to start building up, again, the shopping, the restaurants, and the sense of community pride. This is how it works. Okay. But the bigger part of this is, if we had marijuana legalized and people understood the destructive nature of alcohol, there's actually a brand new study that came out in September that shows that when a husband and wife both smoke marijuana, the risk of domestic abuse plummets. Now, I think it's a choice whether you use it or not, but I can't argue with the idea I want less domestic abuse.
Okay. Let me.
Well, of course, there have been many different statistics to show, the pros and cons of marijuana usage. And, with anything that you do, there has to be a personal responsibility and accountability for, how you go about doing things. And even understanding that marijuana is illegal right now, and if you get caught with it, you are going to be risking a felony conviction or some type of fine of sorts, is something that needs to be understood, as well as if it is something that people see as, the changing of the times to where marijuana should be decriminalized, having the proper education and literacy, to be able to speak intelligently about why you take the stance that you take with marijuana. And that's the challenge, because as we're moving into 2015 and beyond, and we want to be current with outdated laws and outdated policies, you have to be able to speak intelligently about, why you're in support or not in support of. And when it comes to the conversation of marijuana, again, it's a for a lot of people, because of the stigma that's been associated with it for so long. When you talk about whatever positive effects or benefits may come from it, it's going to take a hard educational and literacy piece to make that relevant and to make it something that people are informed about, where they can make a conscious decision.
And that is one of the risks that we have on the early side of this, Dennis. You're right. When you have prohibition, you've swung that pendulum really far one way. And when you open up that floodgate, it's going to swing hard the other. And it will be a part of the community's personal responsibility to try and educate the community that, look, we're going to get this. We can't be drug driving. You can't be doing that. The reason we're legalizing it is because we've got to get it out of our kids' hands. The problem right now is when someone's willing to break the law and sell pot, selling to a 14-year-old is nothing. Whereas someone with an established business in the community would be responsible for selling it to 18 and older or 21, whatever we choose, and then to also be part of that team, and this will be a hard step, but to be part of that team of police who say, that work with police and say, look, I know some people who are still selling it on the black market. One, it's taking money out of my pocket. Two, I know they're selling to our kids. So there will be a lot of responsibility for the community in this to come together and legalize this right. You're absolutely right about that.
Now, when we talk about raising African-American children above the poverty level, let's talk about the minimum wage. What is your position on the minimum wage? There's a large number of children who come into foster care. They're not supposed to come by reason of poverty, but I would think that a lot of times poverty has a lot to do with why children end up in foster care. So what is your position? If you were elected governor for the state of Wisconsin, what are your thoughts on the current minimum wage? What would you do about that?
Well, I want to be very clear. I do not think in any way that $7.25 is a living wage. I don't think that that's nearly enough to raise a family or to sustain in current economic times. The thing is, if we raise it to $10.10, there's two problems. The first one is, anytime you raise the minimum wage, it's going to create unemployment and it's going to raise prices. The amount of data that we have on this it's extensive, and you can't ignore it. But the bigger part of this is that we have to ask ourselves why we're raising the minimum wage. And the reason we're raising the minimum wage is because of the inflation in the system. And that's created by the Federal Reserve. And then the Federal Reserve does this. When they print this money for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, when they print it for the wars, when they print it to give it away in social programs, this creates huge inflation. This is why we're paying $6 for a pound of hamburger and $5 for a pound of cheese. This is not an unknown manifestation. This is all completely predictable. And so the bigger problem we have to do is convince our legislators in Washington, D.C., you've got to audit the Federal Reserve. You've got to shut down the Federal Reserve. The inflation is destroying the poor communities. And by far across America, the poor communities are made up of African Americans.
Okay. Let me state this statistic. I'm going to quote something from the Wisconsin Council on Children and Families new report. And it indicated that 4 out of every 5 African-American children in Wisconsin live in poverty households, compared roughly to 2 out of 3 Latino children and 3 out of 10 white children. So this issue of poverty is a big problem and issue for the African-American community. Our children need parents who have viable income, who have good paying jobs where they can support their families, on a living wage. As a libertarian, they normally don't support public transportation. How would you address that problem of getting to a job site 20 miles, 30 miles away?
Well, generally what we find is that when there's a marketplace to be served, someone will step in and serve that marketplace. Right now, one of the things that we see coming out is a thing called Uber, which is an online order up your cab. Order up, you say, here, I need to go from A to B, and here's what I've got for money. And what you'll find is in something like that, in a model like that, for a fraction of the cost, something that charities might actually even provide for you, you might actually find somebody who's already running that route in their car, and they'll give people a ride and get paid to do it for a fraction of the cost. Every time you look at these transportation systems, if they had a functioning way to do it and make a buck, they would have already been done. So what this means is that we're sucking dollars out of the economy in order to provide this. Well, those dollars could have provided the jobs that would have allowed you to get the car so you could have driven yourself to work. But when you pull these dollars out of the economy, you eliminate that mechanism within the economy. So we've got to keep dollars in the economy and work with the free market in order to create these opportunities for transportation in the future. There also may be something better than a bus. In fact, in a number of countries, private companies will actually do this. They'll find companies who hire individuals who need rides, and they'll come in and say to the company, hey, for $50 a day, I'll drive through the neighborhood, pick these people up, and bring them down. Doesn't cost the taxpayers. You get a more direct route. You're not switching buses halfway through. And everybody actually earns a buck for a better service. So there are some solutions. It's not perfect, and it's not perhaps the solution. But I'm not willing to say that the only thing that can make that happen is public transportation.
Okay.
We have to look and see what other might be available.
All right. And one quick last question for you, Bob. There were federal dollars that were declined for Badger Care, and there's a lot of children in our community who have Badger Care as their primary insurance. What would you have accepted those dollars?
I would not have accepted the dollars, and I'll tell you why. Once again, if we accept those dollars, since they're borrowing so much money already, this is just more inflation in the system. But more importantly, before I even do anything with Badger Care, my first plan to fix our healthcare system is I'm going to mandate that our hospitals and our clinics post the prices for all goods and services. And what that will do, and I know that they're going to say, well, Bob, we pay one price for Medicare, we pay a different price for insurance, we pay a different price for this insurance, we pay a different price for cash. I got it. I don't care if you have to list 20 prices. But just because you walk into McDonald's with a coupon doesn't mean McDonald's doesn't get to post their price. What this will do, Jermain, I want you to think about this. What this will do is this will expose what the costs are for services at hospitals. And what will happen is that people in the community who know how to do these jobs will look at these prices and go, I can do that for half that cost. And then small businesses started by individuals in your community will start to open these up. And I'll give you one that's really important, and that is to deal with diabetes. The black community deals with a higher rate of diabetes than any other community of people in America.
Right.
And I don't see there's any reason why we can't have a small phlebotomist shop in every neighborhood, and you get to go in and not only do you get your sugar tested, you can get a whole set of blood work tested for $50. That's a much better way to design a healthcare system. When people are competing for prices come down. And I don't need the money from the federal government. We spend more on healthcare in this country than everybody else by a long shot. We don't need more money in it. We need a better healthcare system, and we can do a lot more with the dollars we already have.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but I want to say thank you, Bob, for being on the show today and answering these very important questions. There was a lot of good information, important information that you have put out there, and just want to wish you well on this campaign trail and at the polls next week, Tuesday.
Hey, thank you, Jermain. And Dennis, thank you for chiming in. I appreciated the chance to get to meet you.
No, thank you.
Have a great day. Good afternoon. You're listening to Fresh Start Today. We just wrapped up our first segment with Libertarian gubernatorial candidate, Mr. Robert Burke. That was a very interesting conversation. Wish we could have had him on a little bit longer. And I know some callers wanted to probably call in to 414-444-5250 and didn't have an opportunity. But we're going to move right into our next segment, and we're going to be talking with Mr. Dennis Walton, who is the outreach coordinator from the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative. Welcome, Dennis.
Man, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Anytime, man. This is going to be a very important week in Milwaukee. What's going on?
Well, not only is it an important week, but just understanding the substance behind all of the activity around boys and men of color, around fathers, and how we have to stay consistent with keeping the issues of supporting, again, black men, men of color, fathers, and helping to get them back into their rightful place of leadership.
So there's this huge summit that's coming up, and it's the 9th year.
Yes.
Okay, how many men do you all normally have participate in the summit?
Well, just to give you a little history,
Okay.
the Milwaukee Fatherhood Summit is the largest annual gathering of men in the state. You
Okay.
know, and
Wow.
usually we draw an average of 1,000 men a year,
Okay.
and there have been times where we've, where the numbers have went up to over 2,000. Just to let you know the need, and that's been over the course of 9 years that there's been an average of 1,000 men who have attended the summit.
And these are men from different backgrounds, racial background,
From
economic
different backgrounds, but primarily up until this point, up until the last couple of years,
Okay.
the summit primarily served African American fathers,
Okay.
and we've been doing a lot of outreach with establishing relationships with the South Side, working
Great,
with more
great.
with the Latino community, the Hispanic brothers, as well as Caucasian brothers as well. But for the most part, the summit has served primarily African American men up until the last 2 years, and now we're doing a broader outreach.
What are some of the services that men can receive if they participate in the summit?
Well, there's so many different things that we have going on, and I have to say that the summit is we could not have the summit if we didn't have the support from the community. So we've been fortunate to establish very key partnerships with the community at large. All different community-based organizations come together. One, we have Milwaukee County Child Support Services,
Great.
which is a key partner in what we do, because traditionally, men who are not educated to what's happening with child support and their rights, they have a fear that they will be incarcerated, or there's going to be some penalty. When men traditionally think about child support, they think about themselves being penalized. So Milwaukee County has done a really good job over the last few years with just rebranding themselves, where they were once looked at as a punitive type of.
So for the men who are listening to this program right now, they have some child support issues as it relates to the financial aspect of child support. Because I think we also, in terms of rebranding, we have to look at how we define child support.
Right.
And there's so many different aspects to child support versus just the financial
Yeah,
piece. So,
definitely.
so are you saying for the men who are listening to this program that if they have concerns or fears around whether or not they will be incarcerated for not paying child support, being in
Right.
arrears, that's nothing that they should be worried about or concerned?
Well, there are men who have warrants who are, because of outstanding child support debt, but most of the time it is because they have not confronted the situation. They have not taken the responsibility or taken the initiative to confront the situation. And a lot of times, when you look at the fact that, we've lost, I don't know how many jobs over the last,
Too many.
8 to 10 years. A lot of men have fallen on hard times, and not knowing their rights, not knowing that they have the ability to go before the courts and file a motion to have their child support reconsidered.
Now, what about if they can't afford that? So are you saying this is a free service? Where can men go to file this motion? Because
Well, motions are free.
Motions are free,
Again,
okay.
it's really about literacy and education. That's
and
what's
they can
going
get
to
that for attending the summit.
they
They
can
can
get
learn
that-
how to
how
go
to do
out.
all of those things.
Great. So
Yeah.
there's some legal assistance, it sounds like.
There-
Guidance around how to
Yeah.
proceed or file motions, but information, education is key.
It's key, and
Okay.
that's what's going to empower men, empower fathers,
Right.
is not being afraid to confront their issues. But if you don't have the
Child
proper,
support don't go away.
no, it's not going away, not unless you take care of the debt.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many instances where child support is being eliminated.
That's
Again,
the key word for the day, eliminated. You say child support being eliminated.
yeah,
That is
definitely,
excellent.
Definitely,
That's
yeah.
excellent.
The summit has actually been responsible for eliminating over $6 million in debt.
$6 million.
Yeah, over the last 9 years.
Listen, brother, I don't know who out there listening, but if you have some child support debt, you need to go to the Milwaukee Fatherhood
But let me be
Summit.
clear about that,
Okay.
because it's not about getting your child support resolved, or not being responsible for your situation. The debt that's been eliminated is the interest in arrears.
Gotcha.
Men have a principal and they have an interest, just like a loan.
Like a loan. So
And
it's
the
the interest.
interest is accrued to the state.
So let me ask you, for an individual who may have had an experience of being incarcerated,
Mm-hmm.
will they accrue interest during their incarceration as well?
They
Or
will
that's
if
suspended?
they will if they do not file the paper the proper
don't file the paperwork.
proper paperwork once they're incarcerated.
Okay.
But if they file the proper paperwork, then their child support debt is suspended until they're able to seek and find employment.
Now the Fatherhood Summit is this Friday, the 31st of October, from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then on Saturday, November the 1st, from 7:30 a.m. to noon at Destiny Youth Plaza, 7210 North 76th Street. And the theme this year is the pursuit of opportunity through healing and change. So it looks like we have a caller on the line. We're going to take this call.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, caller.
Hello,
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm fine. The prison project for child support will suspend the payments owed during the incarceration, but they do not suspend the interest on the debt at the point that the person was incarcerated. And they'll have 90 days upon release to find employment and begin to start paying. That's the way the project works.
Okay, if you could do me a favor, can you repeat that one more time? Because it seemed like you're going in and out, and I think you're sharing some very important information. Can you share that one more time?
Yes, I said the prison project with child support suspends the child support order while incarcerated, but it does not suspend the interest owed on the debt at the point the person went into prison.
Okay.
And the people, when they get released, they have 90 days to find employment before the order goes back into effect.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for sharing that information.
How you doing, Mr. Holmes?
I'm doing great.
All right.
I thought
I'm on my way to the House of Correction right now. Teach classes.
All right.
And for those who don't know, Mr. Holmes has been a pioneer in the work of fatherhood in our community, and that needs to be acknowledged. He is definitely, one of the major reasons why we even are able to have this conversation,
Wow.
address this subject, and be here today working to organize resources that help me. And he has been on the forefront and in the front line of this work since its inception here in Milwaukee. It's also one of our partners as well.
Well, we definitely want to give kudos to Mr. Holmes for all of your dedicated work in the community to this issue, bringing attention to this issue of fatherhood. And Mr. Holmes, your organization, the name of your agency is what? My Father's
House Incorporated.
And what's the phone number there?
353-9015.
And what are some of the services that you all offer there?
We teach primarily responsible fatherhood, anger management, healthy relationships, and we are under contract with the family court to assist in the Children's First program, which is an alternative to incarceration, help men find employment who are not paying their child support.
And your phone number one more time, Mr. Holmes?
414-353-9015.
All right. Thanks a lot for calling in today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Excellent job, Dennis. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
So what are some of the workshops that will be offered this weekend? Do you have any of that information?
Yes, I do here.
Okay.
There'll be a host of different workshops. We'll have workshops around co-parenting. We'll have workshops around criminal background expungement. We'll have workshops around building stronger fathers, building stronger families. What does it mean to be a strong father in your family today? What does parenting in today's world look like when you're a dad in 2014? And it just goes on and on and on. We have a great panel of speakers who will be coming in from all across the community, addressing various topics when it comes to helping men have the education that they need to empower themselves. So there'll be a lot of very healthy discussions around family, around what we must do as men to become nurturing fathers. What does it mean to become a nurturing father? You know, how do you take care of yourself? How do you eliminate your stresses? How do you sustain yourself in a time when things are hard? How do you deal with all of the trials and tribulations that come with sustaining a family? You know, and understanding that there are things that you can do to nurture yourself, and that you can, you know, nurture your family, as well as, you know, make it through the struggles as well.
Okay, so for those who are listening, listen, if maybe as a mother or a father, maybe your son can benefit from attending this year's Fatherhood Summit. Fatherhood Summit. Some of the event highlights, things that you can go back and tell, is on-site child support case review, on-site traffic case review, job and resource fair will be available for individuals who need employment, health fair, screenings, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
On-site summit was coaching for the day, an on-site free credit review and assessment, and there will also be some barbers. So it seems like you have a lot of community partners that you're working with to make this a success.
See, the thing is that you know, the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative, definitely we want to, you know, take our hat off to Mayor Tom Baird for being a number one advocate for fathers over these last 9 years, with support of the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative and helping to bring it into existence as well. But we could not be successful if we didn't have the cooperation from SDC, the cooperation from Milwaukee Child Support Services, from Driver's License Recovery, from individuals like Al Holmes, from My Father's House, and so many. It's, you know, Curtis Marshall, who is our program chair. So many people are working behind the scenes to, you know, do their very best to connect the dots and help men to address their issues. And see, traditionally, you know, this is still work that's being pioneered in our community as well as in our nation. And for those who don't know, Milwaukee is at the forefront of fatherhood work in the nation. We are further ahead than most people, and we still have so much ground or territory to cover. You know, there's not going to be any shortage of fathers who need help or fathers who are in need. So what we have to do is really look at, what does that mean? Like I said, if we didn't have the support from our partners to show that there is a working model that's in place that can really help fathers to empower themselves.
Now, you mentioned that the city of Milwaukee is one of your partners. The health department.
Yep, the health department.
And SDC.
SDC, the housing authority.
Housing authority. What is your relationship like? I mean, is there a partnership between the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative and the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare or the Department of Children and Families, given the number of children who come into care, who are coming from single-family homes, and the case has identified women? Is there a partner, an active partnership?
Well, that is a partnership that is in the development right now.
Great.
You know, and you know, we've started at a certain place where we're at, and we're expanding. You know, and you know, it's just been work. Again, I'm standing on the shoulders of pioneers that have done this work before me. I'm helping to carry it on. You know, and you know, when you look at the fact that we have a community of men who are totally disenfranchised from the household, when you look at the fact that we have a community that's in you know, going through some of its most challenging times, and you look at how many fathers have been removed from the home or who are not in the home over the last 20 years, and you can shows there's a direct correlation to the conditions of our community and the absence of fathers being in the home. And you know, today now you have the independent woman, you have the strong woman, you have a woman who don't need no man. But you know, we don't live by that philosophy. The philosophy is that if you can have strong fathers, you can have strong families, and strong we have in strong communities. And people, it's one thing to say it, but it's not cliche. It is one of the most single important things. Think about your father. If you had a father or didn't have a father, how did that affect you in your life? There are a lot of people who say that they are in support of fatherhood, but when it comes down to it, they don't know how to support fathers. You see what I'm saying? So we have to continue to do a good job, or do our very best to, you know, to plead our case, to, you know, win over the trust of our community, and let people know that, especially with the a lot of times you talk about the fatherhood initiative, people think it's about child support. It is not about child support or getting men out of child support. What it is about removing barriers and obstacles that prevent men from being most effective in their families.
That sounds great. Well, this sounds like it's going to be a great event this weekend. It is the Fatherhood Summit. The theme is the pursuit of opportunity through healing and change. That's going to be on Friday, October the 31st from 7:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. And then on Saturday from 7:30 a.m. till noon. Location is the Destiny Youth Plaza, located at 7210 North 76th Street. If someone wants to learn more about the Fatherhood Initiative to become a member, what is the number they need to call?
They can call 414-286-5653. They can actually speak to myself or Dale Williams, our project coordinator. Again, that's 414-286-5653, or they can go to MilwaukeeFatherhood.com.
All right, so that sounds great. So we're looking for a lot of people to turn out for this free fatherhood event.
Yeah.
All right.
And I just want to say one thing real quick. Again, the summit is something that we do to gather fathers, but there are a number of different things we do throughout the years to promote fatherhood. And the main thing is that this work is a movement, it's a crusade, and it's something that's not going to go away. So we just ask for the community to, continue to support the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative, support all of the organizations, My Father House, all the people who are doing fatherhood work, and, encourage men to get the help that they need, because we feel, when a man is more committed and involved and responsible in the lives of their children, then we're doing what we can to stabilize our families and community.
There'll be less of need for foster care services if we can get fathers to be responsible and engaged and just doing what real men do. So thanks a lot, Mr. Walton. Thank you for coming in, and look to having you back on maybe after the summer to kind of talk about some of those ongoing efforts.
Yeah, and there'll be a number of different post-summit activities that we'll be holding as well.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So we're back in the studio. This is Fresh Start Today. We're kind of going to shift tracks here and talk about adoption. November is National Adoption Month. So there's a lot of adoption scheduled for the month of November throughout the country and throughout the state. So we want to kind of talk a little bit about adoption. And I have some special guests here in the studio. I have Mr. Mike Heath, who is Director of Outreach and Advancement, and Tiffany Meredith, who is the Director of Programs and Quality Assurance. Both of those individuals are from the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families. And then we also have a therapist by the name of Jacqueline Skalnick. She is the founder and owner of Adoption Wellness. So welcome to all of my guests. How are you today?
Good, Jermain.
Doing well, thank you.
Doing great. So we're going to talk about adoption. Adoption is a very delicate, sensitive topic. It's unfortunate that some people have to go through adoption. It's a reality. It's part of our world, But then it also can be a very rewarding life, something that's very positive for some population of children. And oftentimes we talk about adoption, we talk about how that children need to be adopted because they have been removed from their parents. And I'm talking about from a child welfare perspective. And so certain conditions weren't met, and now we have to find permanency for this child. But there's all kinds of adoptions that go on. There's adoption, international adoption, there's domestic adoption. And so today in our conversation, we're going to be talking about a certain aspect of adoption that we typically don't hear about. We hear about a lot of the joys and, oh, I got this cute little baby, and, oh, Mr. So-and-so, can you please adopt this kid? But there's a thing called post-adoption depression syndrome. And I was really surprised to hear about this. So we're going to talk about that today. And hopefully we'll have you all come back on throughout the course of this month, and we can talk about some other areas of adoption. But today I want to kind of talk about post-adoption depression syndrome. What exactly is post-adoption depression syndrome?
Post-adoption depression syndrome, also known as the acronym PADS, P-A-D-S, is something that's just recently been talked about more commonly. And just like any other mental health diagnosis, there's a lot of people who may have some apprehension about talking about how they feel and talking about how it affects them. So
with PADS, so we know that it's existed, but from what I've researched, that it's not as widespread or accepted throughout certain communities. And some of those communities were the mental health community, it was the adoption, child welfare community, that a lot of people have really not really embraced, that people who adopt a child can actually share some of the same symptoms that women who have babies with postpartum depression. Am I saying right?
That's
postpartum
right.
depression. There's some similarities there. So why is it that someone who just adopted a child, and we're talking in the context of a domestic adoption, why would they suffer possibly from depression?
Well, there's a lot of risk factors involved when diagnosing somebody with post-adoption depression, very similarly to just a generalized diagnosis of depression. The reason why it's a cultural or societal issue, whereas people aren't as willing to recognize that as the person who adopted a child, they're not as willing to recognize, hey, I need help, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's all about expectations not being met. And so when we're talking about adoption, which also always starts with loss, right? When you start with something broken, you put it together, there's going to be some element of being mismatched.
Oh, wow.
And that expectation not matching up for the child or for the parent, that's where the element of depression comes in, because it's a letdown or a disappointment of dreams and hopes. And so when we're talking about adopting a cute, beautiful baby or child, or however old the child is, there's an element of the adoption, but then there's beyond the actual process. There's life. And just like any person becoming a new parent, there's going to be disappointments. There's going to be challenges. And when you have unrealistic expectations and you have a child that's coming from a broken place, you put those two together and there's going to be some challenges. So the aspect of post-adoption depression is more so about those feelings of hopelessness, feelings of not being able to survive in the way that they're doing things, and it questions a lot of people's parenting, and that's where it becomes sort of a societal feeling of shame or guilt. So many parents who go through adoption, Jermain, whether it's foster care, domestic, international, they have to pass through so many layers of tests and home studies and paying fees, and some folks wait years. So there's an element of shame and guilt if someone has to step back and admit, hey, I need some help. And it shouldn't have to be like that.
So do you think there's a difference in what general adoptive parents experience when they adopt from a different country, infants or older children who have been institutionalized? Is there a difference from what domestic versus international adoptive parents? Do you think there is a difference in terms of adopting from a country far away versus adopting an institutionalized or a child that's been in foster care? Do you think that what those two parents experience is similar or different?
I think anytime someone becomes a parent, they have a shared or universal transition that happens in their lives. They are now responsible for caring for another child. If you birth a child, that's one experience. If you adopt a child from infancy versus a 5-year-old who's been in an orphanage or institutionalized care, or maybe a 14-year-old who's been living on the streets, it's what that child brings to your family that makes the transition a little bit different. So for families who are going into those adoptions, sure, the legal process will be different, the actual paperwork will be different, you're working with different entities such as governments and foreign partners, but the actual union of a child and a family is the same. You may have additional layers like a different language if you're adopting internationally, or you may have issues of food. If you're having a child come from an orphanage who's used to having to ration one serving of food, with 5 other kids, they come into your home, they're overwhelmed by the difference of going to a grocery store.
Well, we also see that with domestic adoptions. When you're adopting from out of foster care, a number of these children come from homes where poverty was a very real, it was a part of their reality. There was not enough, never enough. There was Kool-Aid but no sugar. There was, cereal no milk. Peanut butter, no jelly.
Right.
That was a lot of our realities. And so when you talk about hoarding, or you're talking about grocery store experience, or sitting down for a meal, or just knowing that there's going to be a meal on a regular basis that you can count on it like clockwork, is foreign to a number of kids. So when we talk about some of these barriers, you mentioned language, the food issues, I still see some of those in domestic adoption, and particularly from cultural adoption. And we can talk about transracial adoptions, transracial foster care placements, where the culture and the heritage of a child is not celebrated to an extent that really would probably help this whole adoption experience. So I'm just saying that I can see that both domestically as well as internationally. I don't know.
Well, I would just add to that because you hit on a good point that each and every adoption is really a cross-cultural adoption, right? That it doesn't really matter if you're going across the big pond or you're going across the street or you're going across the state. When kids go and live with a family that is not their own and they have to learn about new rules, new expectations, new values associated with education, with religion, with how we treat each other, that is a cross-cultural experience. And it really, to some extent, has little to do with whether or not that child looks like that parent in their home, right? That anytime you have to go live with somebody else where you have not been a part of the development of that culture, that becomes a real culture shock for children. So it doesn't matter if it's an international adoption or a child in foster care or a child in foster care who happens to be adopted by their grandma later on. There's a shift there.
Well, I'm not a person who believes in fairy tale adoptions. I don't believe in happily ever after. Not just an adoption situation, but you very seldom see that in birth family situation. And the thing that is concerning for me, or the thing that I hope that we can build on or improve on, is not to sell adoption like there won't be any challenges post-adoption, and that the adoption process is just that it's a process, but there is life after the process. And so when we talk about post-adoption depression syndrome, do you think that some of the depression post-adoption can be related to how the supports look differently pre-adoption versus post-adoption?
We're all looking at each other because it's like, where do we start with that? That's such a and that's a huge thing, right? Because you're absolutely right that we have to be honest and real about what the realities are of parenting, right? And that it doesn't matter if you birth a child or adopt a child, that there are going to be some joys and some real awesome things that happen, but there's also going to be some struggles and some challenges. And so we have to be open and honest about that in our communication. The other piece is that there clearly aren't enough supportive services in post-adoption. We are all well aware of that, and there are efforts and strategies around this state, around this country, to increase that awareness and increase those supports. And so one of the things that we offer at the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families happens to be our Post-Adoption Resource Center. And I'm going to let Mike kind of talk a little bit about what that means for folks.
So, Mike, what is the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families?
A lot of your audience is probably going to recognize us as our former name, which is Adoption Resources of Wisconsin. So we recently changed our name to the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families. We're a statewide resource, Jermain, for all families, foster, adoptive, guardianship, birth parents, and youth. And what we do is we provide resources, training, supports. Tiffany mentioned the Post-Adoption Resource Center. That's for here in Milwaukee as well as southeastern Wisconsin. There's 5 different post-adoption resource centers in the state. And we feel it's really important to kind of piggyback on what Tiffany was talking about that support network, and your question initially of how important it is for all parents to have a network that they can turn to when times do get tough, and they're able to bounce questions and ideas off of one another. So one of the things we offer as well, in addition to the Post-Adoption Resource Center, is a toll-free number. So families, whether they're adoptive families or thinking about adopting, thinking about fostering, they can call us and we can answer their questions.
What's that number?
Got it right here. Just one second. It's 1-800-762-8063.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Jacqueline, Tiffany, and Mike to finish this discussion about post-adoption depression syndrome. All right, we're back on air. This is Jermain, and you're listening to Fresh Start Today. I have in the studio with me Jacqueline Skolnick, the founder of Adoption Wellness Center, and we have from the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families, Tiffany Meredith and Mike Heath. So we were just talking about post-adoption depression syndrome. Jacqueline, what are the symptoms? If someone might think, I might have this, how would they know?
So post-adoption depression syndrome symptoms are very similar to depression in general. So feelings of sadness and loss, hopefulness, maybe gaining weight, losing weight, having little to no interest in the particular child or children that have just been adopted, thoughts of hurting yourself, hurting the children, hurting people around you, an increased level of stress. Maybe you're finding yourself isolating, cutting yourself off from family or friends. Maybe you're just very fatigued, which is a fine line in parenting because you're very sleep deprived. Finding yourself being really irritable, edgy, crying a lot. You're losing communication with your partner. And some people even get physically sick because they're withholding their emotions so much that their body just gives way. And so some of these symptoms, if you're experiencing for more than a few days, if you're experiencing more than 3 or 4 of these symptoms, it's certainly something that we would encourage folks to reach out for help. Let someone know. Get some help therapeutically, tell a friend, make sure you're communicating this with your partner or your friend, because the most important thing is that you are not alone. There's somebody else out there who feels the same way. And when it's different for adoptive parents, there's an element of shame or guilt. Folks go through so much, they don't want to have to admit that they're having problems.
And in that vein, you know, when someone has adopted, you don't want to give a child up. I think there's a lot of processing that goes into that decision, and it's traumatic, you know. So if you think you might be suffering from post-adoption depression syndrome and you're looking for some resources, perhaps you can call the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families or check on their website. The phone number is 1-800-762-8063. Now, the Post-Adoption Resource Center is hosting a workshop or training on talking to children about adoption. That's going to be on Wednesday, November the 12th, 2014 from 6 to 8 o'clock p.m. So, Jacqueline, you're going to be a presenter there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what is this going to look like?
Because it is National Adoption Month, we want to celebrate the joys, but also bring awareness to some of the challenges of adoption. So a lot of folks that adopt children from foster care, or domestically or locally, they forget about the piece, or they try not to address the piece that child may be adopted. It may be shameful, there may be cultural negative impacts around that. So there are families who just need some help with how do we tell our children that they're adopted? Or if the child already knows, what are some things to celebrate? How do we talk to their peers or their teachers? How do we have that conversation about birth family? And to do it in a way that's insightful and sensitive is going to make a big difference in the lives of these children.
Okay, so that's talking to children about adoption on November the 12th, 2014 from 6 to 8 p.m. And where's that going to be held at?
So the nice thing about it, Jermain, is that when we offer our trainings, we offer about one a month. So check out our website for updated information. We offer them either most of the time locally at our site, and we're located at 6682 West Greenfield Avenue, or people also have the option of attending via webinar. And so if they can't make it, if they're not local, if they don't have child care, if what have you, they can always attend from the comfort of their home.
Is there a cost associated with the training?
There is a cost associated.
It's $20 per family to attend.
Now, is there a sliding fee scale? I'm just curious if I can work out a deal if I need to.
Well, here's what I can say to that, Jermain. Absolutely, if people need our resources and they are really challenged, give us a call. We'll see what we can do. Talk to your agency if you're involved with an agency, because oftentimes agencies will host trainings and they'll bring their foster parents in and have them participate in the webinar, and then also have some group discussion as well.
Okay, sounds great. We're going to talk a little bit more about PADS, and then we're going to do some more community announcements. So we're talking about adoptions failing at risk and some of the factors that contribute to failed adoptions. We also talked about, we talked about what post-adoption depression syndrome is. We've talked about the difference between the international community and domestic community. We've talked about birth parents, how they possibly deal with the loss or the whole adoption process versus also parents who involuntarily versus voluntarily give up their child. So this has been a very good discussion about adoption. Is there anything else that you think is really important for us to know about post-adoption depression syndrome, or even adoption in general?
Yes, I think another silent part of the triangle that our community oftentimes forgets that has a voice is the adopted person themselves. So whether they're a child or they eventually we all grow up, right, and we become adults. And as an adopted person myself, to be able to reflect back on what my parents did well, or what are some things that I would like to do differently, and have that opportunity to have a voice to help educate parents who are going through that process now. It's really important for adopted children to also have a peer group or a support group. Okay. And one of the things that my business does, adoptionwellness.com, is we offer tween and teen groups. So when your child is in middle school and high school and they are going through that typical adolescent transition that's difficult for any child, they have this extra layer of, who are my birth family? Who do I look like? Where do I get this from? What am I feeling, and is that normal? To have that peer interaction is very critical for the self-esteem of that child growing up, knowing their role, knowing their identity, whether it's transracially, whether it's their sports abilities, whether it's their academic level. Then have a group of other kids that aren't going to ask them why you don't look like your parents. Just that camaraderie alone is really supportive.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad that you mentioned that you are an adopted child, or you're an adult now, but you were adopted.
I'm an individual that was adopted. Yes.
Thank you for the correction.
First
I told you I'm
person.
in class right now. So Jacqueline, but I just read something where you experienced a transracial adoption, and so hopefully in the future we're going to be able to bring you and some other industry experts and to have a conversation around the various dynamics of transracial, the positive and the areas that we kind of need to work on, to ensure that every child's culture and heritage is celebrated in their home.
Thank you. That's every child's right. And I would love to come back and be a part of that discussion, Jermain.
Well, that's going to be great, because I just showed you all a picture that is my motivation to have this conversation. So we can do a better job, I think, in terms of how we facilitate and manage that whole trans
we have to.
And trans foster care placement. Because a lot of in the foster care community, a lot of the adoptions that take place they happen as a result of that child being placed in a foster home. So we're going to really talk about celebrating diversity in a transracial context. So it's been really great having this conversation. Is there anything that you would like the community to know about the Adoption Resource Center? I'm not the Adoption Resource Center, I'm sorry. About the coalition for children, youth, and families. You offer trainings like once a month, and they're open to the public.
I'm sorry, Mike. They are. So we have this one scheduled. We have some things that we're working on for December. We're in the process of putting together our 2015 training schedule. So I would really encourage folks to stay informed of all the different things that we're doing in the community and across the state.
And the other thing I would add, Jermain, is we have over 100 tip sheets for families. So if you're a listener out there that's thinking about fostering or adoption, we have topics that are no longer than 4 pages long on a variety of different topics about foster care and adoption. Plus, we have the Midwest's largest foster care and adoption lending library. So we will rent it out to you for free. You can loan out the materials that we have. You can look it up by author, subject, or title, and families really appreciate that as well if they want a little bit more in-depth information.
Because I think the goal of today's program is to learn about post-adoption depression syndrome so that we hopefully can minimize adoptions failing, and home environments become very stressed and traumatic, which is not good for any person that's living in that environment. So that was the purpose of talking about post-adoption depression syndrome. And I just want to make a couple community announcements before we close, and we'll be coming back next week. Fresh Start Family Services is hosting our informational recruitment fair for foster parents or individuals who are looking to become foster parents on November the 15th, 2014, from 10 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. You can call 414-351-1100. That's 414-351-1100 if you're interested in learning more about foster care and what services we offer over at Fresh Start Family Services. Again, that's for our recruitment and informational session on November the 15th at 10 a.m. We also would like to announce that the Black Child Development Institute of Wisconsin will be hosting their annual Recognition and Community Service Dinner on November the 13th, and you can visit their website at bcdi-milwaukee.org. That's bcdi-milwaukee.org. Remember again that for foster parents that October is Fire Safety Month. Be sure to change your battery and your smoke detectors, comply with DCF rules and regulation. Fire extinguishers should be in the kitchen or near the kitchen. And then also, we want to make sure that you like us on Facebook at Fresh Start 860. You can tweet us at Fresh Start 860, or you can email us your suggestion for shows, comments by emailing freshstart860@gmail.com. Listen, we're going to have a couple sessions coming up in the very near future that's going to deal. One of the topics is going to be why children kill, and we're going to be looking at what happens, that contributes to children committing certain heinous crimes that sometimes often result in the loss of human life. So we're going to be looking at that issue, and we're going to bring in some forensic psychologists to talk about that in the next couple of weeks. So we want you to stay tuned to Fresh Start today. Give us some feedback in terms of what your thoughts are about the show. If you have questions, comments, or even complaints, we want to hear about it. You can call me, Jermain, at 414-351-1100. So we're wrapping up, and we're going to sign off, and we'll see you next week on the 5th of November. We have Dr. Patricia McManus is going to be our guest, and we're just going to be talking about some interesting things related to child welfare. So tune in.